Story 1. Food is essential for survival, unlike other substances that one may stop taking theoretically. Therefore, it is not something one can simply stop consuming. Story 2. I will talk about food. Most addiction treatment programs have you avoid the substance entirely. It's difficult to avoid food completely. It's similar to just one drink for someone with alcoholism happening every day. Feels like torture. Story 3. Fentanyl. Speaking from experience, I have been clean for over 4 months after being stuck on it for 5 years. It's not you who is addicted. It feels like you have no control over your addiction. It's almost as if the drug is addicted to you, and it won't let you go. Story 4. From what I have witnessed, I have seen too many people drink themselves to death. Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome is a real condition, and the damage to the brain is irreversible. Alcohol reduces inhibition, and alcoholic beverages, especially light beer at a low cost, are easily obtainable. Story 5. Masturbation. The amount of triggers all over the internet does not help. Most advertisements rely on using sex as a draw, and nearly every TikTok search is filled with softcore content. Story 6. Probably one of the many hard drugs. I thought being sober from alcohol and drugs would make it clear that alcohol and cigarettes were the hardest for me. They are so normalized and socially acceptable. Heroin is not as easy to obtain, but it is not supported in society. Nearly everyone would want you to overcome it or help you do so. I have had many people tell me I should drink again or invite me to drink with them. There is not as much support, though this has changed over the years. Story 7. Definitely food. You can't just stop eating. You have to learn how to eat the right portions and healthy foods. Story 8. As someone who was addicted to heroin for 10 years and has been clean since December, I honestly think alcohol is worse in many ways. There is no justification or glorification of a heroin addiction. You are not being invited by your coworkers to use drugs after work. I still struggle with alcohol. I stop for a while, then start again, thinking I can control it, but it always ends up back where I started. Worse than both of those is nicotine by far. It is just so habitual, especially with vaping. One issue that is not talked about enough is phone and social media addiction. It is so easy to look at your phone instead of doing anything else, and I think the consequences of that are yet to be fully realized for us as a society. Story 9. Sex and love addiction is a challenging addiction to overcome. While substance addictions are difficult, they are ultimately meant to be avoided. In contrast, a sex addiction can sometimes feel like you are using the substance to gauge your tolerance and progress. Story 10. I believe that overeating is the most challenging addiction to overcome because it is not possible to stop eating entirely. In contrast, with most other addictive substances, it is feasible to live without them. Story 11. Food. Unlike other addictions, you cannot completely eliminate food from your life, as it is essential for survival. Imagine stocking an alcoholic's fridge with beer and then telling him he can only have 3 per day. Story 12. Food is one of the few addictions that you still need to manage while dealing with your current addiction. Story 13. I agree with nicotine. However, I think benzodiazepines were incredibly hard to overcome. 4 milligrams of flunitrazepam daily for years created an extreme physical experience. Methadone is also an extremely challenging substance to withdraw from if not done with clinical support. I have faced heroin, methadone, and benzodiazepines, and I still smoke cigarettes. Nicotine. Story 14. The one that makes you stop being yourself changes who you are as a person and causes you to stop caring for yourself. Story 15. I would guess alcohol or heroin. I went off benzodiazepines cold turkey, and that was difficult, but I would guess those two are much worse. Story 16. I haven't experienced it, but many say that fame is a significant addiction. As soon as you get a little, you want more and more. That's why many reality shows feature individuals who are desperately trying to reclaim their relevance. Story 17. Either nicotine or alcohol is always available and can be purchased and used whenever without any hassle, making the challenge of quitting either one even more difficult, especially when you're just starting out. I have been sober for 1.5 years and have been off nicotine for over a year, but those first 3 to 5 months after quitting were torturous. Story 18. Alcohol is a challenging substance. It is prevalent and socially acceptable, often encouraged. If you choose not to drink, you may feel like an outcast. It is easy to become trapped in negative circumstances. Story 19. I don't know if it's an addiction, but I think one very difficult thing to overcome is realizing that the present moment is all we have. The past and future aren't even real. Story 20. I have never been a smoker, but I believe cigarettes are easy to obtain, allowing you to smoke without any special occasion. Story 21. Cigarettes. I have tried many methods to reduce and eventually quit, but nothing has worked for more than a few days. Even after my doctor advised me to stop smoking due to inflammation in my mouth caused by dental problems, I couldn't quit for more than 2 days. Perhaps I am not trying hard enough, but I have successfully managed my alcohol and cannabis consumption. Story 22. Food is essential, as you always need at least some. It's like telling a drug addict they can have just a little of the drug each day, but never enough. Story 23. Sugar is hard to quit because it is readily available, hidden in nearly all food we consume, and tastes so good. Most importantly, there are no taboos or laws against its consumption or overconsumption. While people may encourage you to reduce sugar intake or warn you about diabetes, no one will react negatively if you eat cupcakes and drink sodas publicly. Story 24. I feel like it's probably food or smartphones. They are things you need for daily life now, so you can't just avoid using them entirely. You have to learn moderation. Story 25. Every addict will have a different drug of choice, which will be the hardest for them. In terms of physical addiction, opiates tend to have the biggest impact, while cocaine, with its very short half-life, causes less long-term physical addiction. However, cocaine is more expensive, leading to a greater financial impact. Gambling can bring people to their knees the fastest, as individuals can go from their first bet to losing their homes in just a few weeks. Eating disorders, when viewed on the addiction spectrum, are very tough to recover from because one cannot be abstinent from food like they can with drugs or other addictive behaviors. Imagine being an alcoholic who must drink whiskey 3 times a day in a society that constantly discusses diet and weight. This illustrates the difficulty of recovering from an eating disorder. This is why eating disorders have the highest death rate of any psychiatric illness. Honestly, there is no right answer here. From my personal experience and what I have witnessed from friends and individuals in the recovery community, I advise avoiding opiates, particularly heroin. Once you experience the warm embrace of an opiate high, it's very hard to return to normal life and be okay. Well done to anyone who does recover. Story 26. Sugar and pornography. Sugar is so common that people often do not want to admit it is even a problem. Pornography is similar. It is also a topic that many people do not openly discuss. So what exactly is the benchmark? How much is too much? Your parents may not say, your school may not address it, and your doctor probably would not bring it up without prompting. Story 27. Once you have learned to live on your own and have been alone for a prolonged time, you realize how hard it is to enjoy the company of others for longer durations. Also, sugar can significantly affect your well-being. Story 28. I have been addicted to opiates for 18 years. I used Norco for about 6 years, Roxy for maybe 2 to 3 years, and black tar heroin for about 7 years. The death of my mother couldn't even stop me. I have also been using fentanyl for about 2 to 3 years. Withdrawals are the worst feeling in life, and I don't know if I could wish it upon my worst enemy. However, people like Hitler or Bin Laden could experience this day after day until they die. Story 29. I haven't had to deal with any other addictions in my life. I do drink, and I don't use drugs due to a bad experience. I have always been responsible about it, knowing my family's history of addiction. I gamble but always limit myself to whatever I have in my wallet, usually $20. However, sugar is so readily available that breaking free from a sugar addiction was difficult. I managed to overcome it but fell off the wagon again after a depressive episode. Nevertheless, I was able to get back on track. Story 30. Anywhere giving up is forced upon you, choosing to quit for yourself will make any journey much easier. Story 31. I know many recovering heroin and opiate addicts who cannot quit smoking. Alcohol withdrawal can also be fatal, and it is legal and socially acceptable. Story 32. Gambling is challenging because it can gradually ruin your finances and those of the people around you. Additionally, there is a significant stigma associated with it. Story 33. I politely disagree. Look at how many people die from cigarette-related diseases every year. It's significantly more than from fat. Any drug that is legal and accepted automatically makes it harder to address these issues, but that's just my opinion. I have overcome meth and opiates, so I am not speaking without experience. Story 34. In my experience, it's been caffeine. I quit smoking and never looked back. I have relapsed on caffeine so many times that I don't even consider quitting anymore. I just try to cut back, but I always come back for a Pepsi. Story 35. Meth and Xanax were unbearable to quit. On my first day in rehabilitation, I confided in a girl addicted to heroin about the high doses I was taking. I will never forget how she stopped in her tracks, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You are going to have a brutal time." At that moment, it truly dawned on me how serious my situation was and the pain that was to come. And pain it was that came. Story 36. Gambling on my phone is so easy. Everything else feels like a waste of time and energy, even though it drains me faster than anything else could. Story 37. Maladaptive daydreaming is called maladaptive for a reason. It can be harmful because there is nothing physical involved. It is all in your mind. For someone trying to overcome it, you must find ways to control your thoughts. Another issue is self-harm, which can also be concerning. Story 38. As someone who is 60 years old and has tried nearly every drug, I was able to quit them all, but cigarettes are the one I can't seem to stop. I want to clarify that I have never used fentanyl, so I cannot compare it to the other drugs. Story 39. Being consumed by an idea that can never be fulfilled, always thinking and yearning for something that will never exist, creates an all-consuming feeling that never fades. The highs and euphoria from substances will eventually wear off, but there's no returning to life before realizing that everything could have been different. Story 40. Benzodiazepine takes up to over 2 years and is difficult to endure the entire time. It is absolutely the worst. Story 41. Probably drug addictions. I saw a podcast about former addicts. One of them described their nose being able to smell hash from afar when they walked past a bush. Imagine living like that, constantly reminded of your addictive past while calmly walking down the streets. They also described their brain beginning to scream when it smelled it, trying to compel them to take it. Story 42. Being genuine can be challenging. Honestly, I feel that anything rewarding for your body or brain that is easy to access can be hard to quit. Substances like cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, pornography, and video games fall into this category. I do not have any serious addictions, but there were times in my life when I felt I was watching too much pornography. I also used to bite my nails when I was younger, but I stopped by clipping them. I have heard that cocaine is the hardest substance to quit due to its effects on the brain. Story 43. There is no right answer to this. Some people say nicotine. I used nicotine socially for years, approximately once every 3 months, and never once did I feel the urge to use it during the 3 months in between. One day, I stopped all nicotine and didn't even bat an eye. I know other people who tried quitting nicotine 10 times and still cannot kick the habit. Story 44. I have had experience with a few substances. The hardest for me was cigarettes, followed by alcohol. The worst withdrawal was from kratom. It is similar to opioids. The only nice thing about it was that it didn't give me cravings like cigarettes. It just made me feel the worst despair and anxiety of my life for 3 weeks. I'm glad I was only on it for a few months. After a year, I can see it being much harder. Story 45. For me, it was cigarettes. I quit drinking and drugs without any issues, but cigarettes took 15 years to quit. Story 46. Alcohol is concerning, mainly because people often do not understand its dangers until it is nearly too late. I work in death care, and I observe more people die from alcohol-related issues than from all other drugs combined. It is alarming. Story 47. Counterintuitively, the most destructive addictions are often not the hardest to quit. It quickly becomes obvious to a person that opiates are destroying them and will probably lead to an early death. This doesn't mean quitting them is easy, but it does mean there's a much more immediate incentive to do so. Nicotine, on the other hand, doesn't entail any immediate downsides. You can understand on a cognitive level that it's harmful, but you don't truly feel the consequences until years later when it's too late. So there's no visceral fear pushing you to quit. Story 48. Aside from the obvious hard drugs, sugar and caffeine can also be challenging to quit. Try going cold turkey on those and your body will often rebel. I attempted to cut both and I was plagued by digestive issues. The moment I drank a Mountain Dew, it all disappeared. Story 49. Social media harbors your patterns. The best day ever was deleting TikTok and Facebook and not looking back. People I know have my cell number. Engaging in voice and in person is so much different than a tiny snippet of someone's existence. It has repulsed me to some while reinforcing connections to others. Story 50. The fact that alcohol is available almost everywhere all the time for very little money is concerning. Alcohol can be nearly as harmful as some more traditional hard drugs because it can accidentally cause death and lead to long-term health damage. Story 51. Pornography and lust need to be addressed. Pornography can distort your perception of men and women, leading to objectification, even if you only view it. The situation worsens as it escalates, ultimately damaging your future relationships. This is an issue that is often overlooked and not taken seriously, but I believe it will become increasingly significant in the coming years. Story 52. It's difficult to say without clarifying what is meant by hard and what is meant by overcome. I quit heroin in 2013, and it was really hard. The grip that drug has on you is challenging to describe. I quit smoking cigarettes in 2015, and it was difficult, but for different reasons. Physically, it wasn't like I was struggling without them, at least not to the same degree as with heroin. However, it was hard because I could justify smoking cigarettes more than I could justify using heroin. I have issues with food, and it is hard to overcome, mostly for the same reasons as cigarettes. It's easily justifiable. I overcome it regularly but have moments where I fall back for a day or two. Then, I make the decision to recommit, and I do so successfully, which is something I never accomplished with heroin. Physically and psychologically, many substances are extremely difficult to overcome, like heroin, but the necessity to quit is so obvious because I've destroyed my life with it. Other substances, like food or nicotine, are physically easier to overcome, but the necessity to quit isn't as obvious. I haven't spent my rent on cigarettes, stolen from my loved ones, or gotten arrested for it. After working in drug rehabilitation for the last decade, I can tell you that probably the most difficult substances to overcome are benzodiazepines and alcohol. Story 53. Absolutely, I quit and ended up in the emergency room with seizures and my internal organs shutting down when I stopped cold turkey. The doctor said I couldn't do that and had to taper off, that it's harder to quit than alcohol or heroin. Well, I did it nonetheless, and it was literally hell. Quite honestly, it almost killed me and took years to feel even remotely human again. I wouldn't recommend doing it the way I did, but at least I lived to tell the tale. Story 54. I'm gonna guess alcohol because its use is so widespread that it's everywhere you go. People will judge you for not partaking until they see with their own eyes that you can't handle it. Story 55. Opiates take over your entire soul. I know people at meetings who have been clean for over 30 years and still admit to thinking about getting high every day. You can love it more than your family, friends, spouse, or even yourself. It provides the best feeling in the world, which is why it is so dangerous. The withdrawals are a nightmare. Think of the worst you have ever felt, then multiply that by 1,000. Story 56. As an addict in recovery, I just celebrated my birthday yesterday, and for the first time, I was sober. Addiction drains you and leaves little good to cope with the life you have left. It is unforgiving and ruthless. My drug of choice was opiates, ranging from painkillers to heroin, ultimately leading to an addiction to fentanyl. Living that life is mentally and physically exhausting. In my opinion, Overcoming opiate addiction is one of the most challenging struggles. Story 57. Honestly, I have quit all other drugs and alcohol, but I still haven't been able to quit nicotine. I get so agitated without it. Story 58. The hardest self-harm involves benzodiazepines and 3-MMC. Ecstasy, alcohol, nicotine, and opiates follow. Other drugs were manageable but not as addictive. Story 59. For me, overcoming alcohol was very difficult. It is socially acceptable and I was mentally and physically dependent on it. Story 60. I have heard that it is gambling, and based on my experience with someone who has it, I agree. I have not seen her in over 10 years, but the last time I spoke with her in 2019, she was still involved with it. Story 61. Oxygen is really hard to quit. Even when I try to stop abruptly, I just pass out, and when I wake up, I have relapsed again and am desperately inhaling air as if I need to catch up. It's incredible. Story 62. It was easier for me to give up cocaine and heroin than to stop smoking. I haven't used hard drugs in 6 years, but I only lasted a month without a cigarette. Story 63. I saw people mentioning sugar, with which I really agree. I would have to say comfort food as a whole is significant. Anything unhealthy that you consume when things aren't going well is tough to shake off later with willpower alone. By then, you're accustomed to mid-morning sugar breaks or having a savory snack after dinner, maybe even both. Eating between meals is detrimental to dental health, physical shape, and even morale. You get your sugar fix, but you're always full, digestion becomes chaotic, and it doesn't function like healthier options. Eating small amounts rather than 3 whole meals a day comes naturally because we are great apes, but the apes that do this do not consume the same foods we do, including alcohol, sugar, fermented seeds, and carbonated beverages. Story 64. I have read that nicotine and heroin are the hardest substances. I can vouch for nicotine being very difficult to deal with. Story 65. Food and laziness were my main issues, but my business consultant really helped me overcome several bad habits. He provided me with clear business goals and tasks, and that focus helped me overcome those addictions. Story 66. Anyone who does not acknowledge that heroin has a relapse rate of over 85% is deceiving themselves. When people mention food, I believe they are referring to junk food, because if they were addicted to chicken breast, they would likely not have a problem. Story 67. I lost 100 pounds in 4 years. I transformed my body completely and built muscle. I stopped drinking and using substances on occasional weekends. However, I cannot seem to stop smoking. I wish I never started. It is easier to give up everything else than to quit nicotine. Story 68. For me, it is unhealthy food, sugar, carbohydrates, salt, and fat. I started this habit as a child. Since then, I smoked a pack and a half of cigarettes a day for 20 years, but I stopped 18 years ago. I used to smoke an ounce of cannabis a month, but I quit that 10 years ago. My last addiction is still food. I weigh 350 pounds, and no matter what I have tried, I cannot seem to consistently eat healthy food. Story 69. The hardest addiction is often to comfort or familiarity, that sense of security in what is known. Whether it is the stability of a regular job, staying in an unhealthy relationship, or sticking to routines that do not bring true happiness, it can be incredibly hard to break free from what feels safe, even if it is limiting or unsatisfying. Sometimes, we find ourselves addicted to the idea of certainty, and the fear of the unknown can hold us back. This kind of addiction is not just about substances. It is a mindset. It can take courage to step into the unknown, pursue something new, or make significant changes in life. It is about finding the courage to face the discomfort of change and uncertainty, and in doing so, we often unlock deeper fulfillment and growth. Story 70. Speed, MPH. I have been addicted to speed even as a kid. Nothing goes fast enough. Motorcycles, boats, cars, trucks, anything with a throttle. I have 34 years clean and sober, and I still have to use those 2 buttons on the steering wheel, cruise control, so I will drive what they say is a safe speed. Story 71. Food. I'm on a diet due to some health issues and probably will be until the day I die. It is the most challenging thing I've ever done, and it's not getting any easier. Story 72. Food. You can't just quit eating abruptly like you can with other addictions. Story 73. Probably a proper benzodiazepine or alcohol addiction. Both can be fatal if you stop using them too quickly. Story 74. Gambling takes everything away. The worst part is when you experience a winning streak. The dopamine rush diminishes any possibility of experiencing other joys. I gambled 2 weeks ago, and the chemical rush from a big win has consumed me. I can't stop thinking about the win and the emotional high. I wish I could make this feeling disappear forever. I wish I would never feel this pointless rush that is taking away all the joy in my life. Story 75. Alcohol. I have been struggling with addiction for almost a decade. Now I am a little over 4 months sober. Story 76. No such thing exists. Unless you can find someone who has been addicted to various substances at different times and has overcome all of them, there is no answer. Story 77. I have been addicted to many substances throughout my life, including alcohol, marijuana, stimulants, and opiates. None of these was particularly difficult to quit. However, today's adulterated kratom is the hardest substance to stop using. It is the only drug I have experienced that can leave you absolutely miserable for several months, making it impossible to enjoy anything and causing severe depression. Tianeptine resulted in the most intense withdrawal I have ever faced, but that only lasted 2 weeks. Today's kratom, with all the additives being included, is a nightmare to discontinue. Story 78. Gambling is an endless pursuit. Unlike drugs, alcohol, or food, there is no stopping point. These substances can ultimately lead to an exit, often through death. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.